Our Heart of the Shepherd devotion picks up again in 2 Samuel chapter 17. 2 Samuel chapter 17. And I've titled this devotional, On Whose Side Are You? On whose side are you? I do invite you to open your Bible, follow with us as we consider the scriptures today. Now, 2 Samuel 17 continues the historical record of the insurrection led by Absalom, David's thirdborn son. Now, we're given a window, a front row seat concerning Absalom's war counsel and the opposing strategies he was proffered. Now, 2 Samuel 17, I've titled the chapter itself simply Absalom's War Counsel. Now, Ahithophel counseled Absalom to pursue David, as you'll notice in the first 4 verses. Now, who was Ahithophel? He was an embittered but wise man and the grandfather of Bathsheba. Well, he counseled Absalom to allow him to pursue David and his entourage even as they fled Jerusalem that very night. Now, Ahithophel's strategy was to ambush David before he could organize his mighty men, and then he would smite the king only. Verse 2. Then he encouraged Absalom that if he struck David, he would bring back all the people, and all the people shall be in peace. Well, Absalom and all the elders of Israel agreed with Ahithophel's counsel in verse 4. Yet, Absalom made a fateful and providential error for David. Now, the young self-appointed king commanded, Call now Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear likewise what he saith. Now, we met him in chapter 16. Now, Hushai's counsel, you'll notice in verses 5 through 13, controverted Ahithophel's counsel. What did Ahithophel say? Pursue David now, cut the head off. Well, remembering though, for us, Hushai was covertly loyal to David. He fulfilled his mission and he gave opposing counsel to Ahithophel. Now, Ahithophel counseled Absalom pursue and destroy David before he could organize or pass over the Jordan River. Hushai, however, convinced Absalom that he had the luxury of time. He reminded the foolish, self-appointed young king that all Israel understood that David and his men were mighty warriors. Therefore, his counsel to the prodigal son of David was for him to gather a superior force and defeat his father by strength of power, verses 11 and 12. Well, having appealed to Absalom's pride and pursuit of glory, Hushai painted a picture of Israel uniting behind him as their king. He asserted that should David seek refuge in a walled city, and I quote, all Israel would bring ropes to that city and will draw it into the river until there be not one small stone found there. Well, Absalom heeded Hushai's counsel, and surely it was a faithful error. Notice verse 14. Now, though Ahithophel's counsel was the wiser of the two, Absalom rejected his advice and followed Hushai's strategy. Why? Why did Absalom do the irrational? Why did he refuse Ahithophel's advice and permit his father to escape that night? The answer to those questions is summed up in verse 14, where we're reminded once again that the Lord is sovereign regardless of who sits on the throne or wields power as a ruler. We read in verse 14 of 2 Samuel 17, For the Lord had appointed to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel to the intent that the Lord might bring evil upon Absalom. Now, notice that, if you would, an intriguing moment in this overthrow and the plot of Absalom, and then, of course, David and his escape. We find it in verses 15 through 21. The departure of David's spies was actually exposed. Now, having offered his counsel, Hushai successfully delayed Absalom's pursuit of the king. Nevertheless, Hushai knew it was crucial that David not wait to cross the Jordan River that night. So Hushai therefore told the priest his counsel, who then, the priest, sent a woman, perhaps a household servant, to take a message to the sons of the priest, who were, according to verse 17, were waiting outside Jerusalem. Well, despite their attempt to secretly convey the news to David, a boy discovered their ploy and in verse 18 told Absalom, who then sent men to pursue the spies. Well, then a man and his wife who were loyal to David concealed the two spies from Absalom's men in verses 18 through 20. And after their pursuers departed and returned to Jerusalem, the priest's sons took Hushai's counsel to David, and they urged him and his party pass over the Jordan that night. Now notice then, if you would, verses 21 and 22, that David was made privy to Absalom's strategy. Now the spies came to David's encampment, and they brought news concerning Absalom's plot. Hushai warned the king and his company that they must not rest until they cross Jordan that night. Now that returns us back to verse 23. And here we have the death of the wise man, the grandfather of Bathsheba, Ahithophel. Well, knowing his counsel was rejected, Ahithophel understood what Absalom and those who followed him would soon learn. All was lost. The opportunity to crush David and his men was when he was in flight. Now that time had passed, and the opportunity with it. Ahithophel exited Absalom's presence, and we read that he went home to arrange his personal affairs. In verse 23, we find that he, to escape the indignity of execution as a traitor, Ahithophel hanged himself. Well, David's response to the counsel of Hushai is found in verses 24 through 29, where we find his flight to safety. Now, David and his men crossed the river that night, and they arrived at Mahanaim, which was located on the east side of the Jordan, in verse 24. Now, Absalom followed his father in a desperate pursuit, even as those loyal to David brought their king and his company supplies to refresh them. Well, a closing thought for you. You and I will continue our study of this sad time in David's life in another reading. For now, though, take a moment and reflect on the tragic end of Ahithophel, Bathsheba's grandfather. You see, he allowed bitterness against the king to fester in his soul until he found himself in the position of opposing the Lord's anointed. Well, the problem with Ahithophel was not his counsel, but it was his spirit. There was a time when he was numbered among the great men of Israel and was a trusted counselor to David the king. He was renowned for his discernment and wisdom from God. But tragically, a bitter and vengeful spirit has supplanted godly wisdom in his heart. And his testimony in Israel ended in an inglorious act of suicide. Here's a closing warning. A wise man will assess his spirit before choosing sides in a conflict, for only fools oppose the Lord. That is a great principle to close with. May God bless you, give you wisdom, that you will not allow bitterness and an unforgiving spirit to eat away at your soul and thereby take you down a road of trouble. Well, thank you for being a part of this Heart of a Shepherd. Bye-bye.